All right, we'll do this quick. So our next speaker is going to be talking about some evictions and the current moratorium and how that's going to be affecting us. I'd like to see lots of questions about this. How many landlords do we have in the room? There's plenty of landlords in here. So one of the issues with evictions right now is there's a moratorium. George is going to be talking a little bit more about that. However, this is one of the biggest problems for several investors that have lots of properties because they can't evict for non-payment. And that's been a big problem. But George is an attorney here locally. He's got a number of leases and documents that he has available. So if you want to reach out to him, he's going to give you some contact information to get that stuff. So without any further ado, George Gibbs. Thank you.
So I saw he asked how many people are landlords currently, property management. Show of hands on it. So how many of you have been hit by the CDC or CARES Act or some other kind of moratorium? So you probably got a CDC order either shoved at you at the beginning or in some cases when the sheriff showed up. So what we're going to do is just kind of talk about what's going on with the moratorium, how to protect yourself as much as you can. Like Jamie said, and thank you guys for having me here tonight, I guess we're hitting about a year upcoming in March. Since there's been court closures, there's been a CARES Act, there's been stimulus bills. The newest thing, the good news is the CARES Act, which was kind of, if you do your own evictions, it was a really pain in the ass affidavit where they did an inquiry where who held your mortgage. It's FHA, basically let a big forbearance period where tenants didn't have to pay. I had several people went through March through September with no payments. So that ended. And now in September, they decided to put in the Federal Registry, the CDC, Center for Disease Control, decided that based on the risk of impact from COVID-19 spreading, if people were forced into collective housing or moved in together with relatives or faced homelessness, there could be a rapid outbreak of COVID-19. So their idea was to put in a federal eviction moratorium. That got challenged in court. They got sued in Atlanta. We were fingers crossed hoping, because my initial reaction, like a lot of other attorneys, was what the hell does the CDC have to do with an eviction? Private North Carolina contract. That has since been upheld because they used a lot of fancy words like emergency and crisis and a lot of other scary public health stuff. So it is here. It was supposed to expire January 1st, which I had a feeling wasn't going to happen, which was true. January 1st, all this rent wasn't suddenly going to become due in the middle of winter, and they were going to throw everybody out right after Christmas. So now it's extended to this March the 31st. So what the CDC order basically says, if you've not encountered it yet, is that if you go to evict a tenant for non-payment of rent, you cannot proceed with that action until April 1st, currently. Likelihood cards are on the table, that's probably going to get extended past April 1st. Because I don't see any kind of major turnaround. Reality is the politics of it is going to get extended. Now what that does mean is your tenants basically have a very low standard to fill out this document. It's called an affidavit. Basically what they're saying under penalty of perjury, which should be very serious, that they've made partial payments, that they've sought rent assistance, that they have other funds that they cannot spend, they cannot pay their rent to you. Now I will say the court has not inquired with these tenants whether or not they can actually make partial payments. They've had made partial payments, any other kind of issue. And the other thing you need to be mindful of is North Carolina took it a step further to say, this is through March 31st now, if you go to file a non-payment eviction, you have a responsibility now to mail or email or somehow deliver a blank copy of the CDC form to the tenant. So now what you're doing is giving the blank form over to the tenant, which at any time, court date, prior to court, at the hearing. What happened to me the other day, the last 30 seconds before the judge signed the order, they pulled it out of their purse and was like, oh, this one? If they produce it, your eviction is going to be on hold until at least April. And that's not payment. Now, it's not all doom and gloom because a couple good things have happened. One, what I've been telling everybody since last March is you're going to have to be proactive and protect your investment. So a lot of you probably have multiple properties. You need to make sure that your leases are very strong. Look for issues that are not related to non-payment. So if there's criminal activity, if the tenant's not supposed to have pets, if the tenant's supposed to pay the utility bills and hasn't paid the utility bills, if they have unauthorized people living there, all those issues do not fall under the moratorium. It does not fall under Governor Cooper's order. So all those protections you still have. So this is where it comes back to proactivity. So there's some other things I'm just telling people generally what you should be doing to protect yourself. I will say some of the better news is there's a very large investment program from the state of North Carolina called the HOPE program. That's in all 100 counties. So from my understanding, some of the smaller counties may not have the best of funding. I know Gaston just got about $7.5 million the other day. Some of your more rural areas, the county health and human services probably do not have as large of programs. HOPE has a significant amount of money. If your tenants, problem being is the tenants do have to apply to the HOPE program, but if you are a landlord here this evening, please look into the HOPE program. They just made a major revision to it. It can pay up to 6 months of rent, both retroactive and going forward. There is a caveat. There was a major caveat that once you signed to accept those funds, you were prohibited from non-payment evictions for 90 days or until the end of the lease. Obviously, that does nobody any favors in this room. So the association, I'm not exactly sure who got into someone's ear, but luckily someone got in their ear and told them, this is just, the strings attached are way too severe. So now there is only a 60-day moratorium. So from 60 days after you accept these funds, you can start on day 61 looking back at the non-payment options. Now, of course, the caveat is if there's a de facto issue with the CDC or Governor Cooper's order, you still have a funding issue. But definitely look into the HOPE program. Another thing I am telling everybody is to please consider and know how to terminate a lease. And in that aspect, what we're talking about is a lot of people need to go and are going to month-to-month leases. North Carolina's default rule is on a month-to-month lease, I can give you 7 days notice to quit possession. On that 8th or that end of the month, when you're still there, I can file a holdover eviction. That's just saying to the court, I ended this contract, they're still there. We do not currently, but I'm telling everyone too, to be very cautious. I have a bad feeling this is coming down the line. Probably politically, probably not going to see it in a statewide level. I think it's going to come, if it comes from Mecklenburg County. Some jurisdictions do have provisions that say that non-renewal of leases have to be for cause. So you actually have to have some kind of reason, like you're moving back in the property, or you have to do serious renovations to the property in order to terminate. That is not the case right now. So holdover evictions, if you simply terminate a lease contract, those are still allowed to proceed. So a lot of landlords, be careful, don't make it obvious, especially if you're in certain areas. Mecklenburg County looking at you. Don't make it obvious that you're terminating it for non-payment, but at the end of the day, the reality is the courts have at least recognized that there's a fiduciary duty that many of you as property managers have, or investors. I know many of you go different directions with the property fairly regularly and just simply terminate the lease. But in overall, we're looking at a very strange challenge because I don't think we've ever had, I was not around for the 2008 issues, but I don't believe there was any kind of national eviction moratorium or any kind of major political play, and unfortunately I just do not see any kind of end to it right now. So back to the main thing, if you take anything away from it, I tell you is be proactive to protect your investment or the investment of your clients, protect that fiduciary duty. So be mindful of your lease laws, be mindful of how to terminate a lease, consider the month to month, encourage them to do the HOPE program. And overall, honestly, I think as investors, I would warn you from a legal perspective of really consider what counties you are investing in. There is a significant difference over the river between Mecklenburg and Gaston County. Gaston County, its courtrooms are much more straightforward. There's a breach of contract. Sucks for you, but contracts are contracts. Mecklenburg County is heavily funded by legal aid. Mecklenburg County, as you guys probably know as investors, has an arguable affordable housing issue that the city knows about, but they've decided to pop a Band-Aid on. And that Band-Aid's come in large checks to legal aid. Legal aid has been all over this eviction moratorium. The sheriff in Mecklenburg County will stop the eviction up until the point where he is there about to post the lockout if the tenant produces a CDC form. So if I could say anything as to the business, suggestion, really know your counties. When you're doing these investments and you're looking for properties, do a little research on the county. How long does it usually take for a summary ejectment? If you're looking at tenant-occupied properties, how long does it take to do a summary ejectment? What's the kind of feel of that county?
I got a question.
Is there a challenge coming?
What do you think has to happen in order to lift this moratorium in total?
So your question is, what's going to happen to lift the moratorium?
Right. What are some of the signs that we're going to be back to not having this moratorium?
I think what we're looking for, maybe to the end of the moratorium, would probably be the COVID-19 economic impact going down. I would say maybe with the proposed stimulus checks that are supposed to come out. I know a lot of my clients did not see those stimulus checks come in for their renters. I don't know where they went.
Is there any stimulus for investors?
So the stimulus as far as investors, the HOPE program is inadvertently a stimulus. I know some of my clients have looked into paycheck protection programs or some grants. Of course, that money can be tight, it runs out quickly, it's very slow. I will say that with the HOPE program too, especially. I think their average running is 45 to 90 days to get you paid. Other problem being a lot of these programs have relied on the tenant to take action, which in my opinion, if you don't have to pay your rent in your mind, they still owe it, but if you don't have to pay your rent and there's no enforcement mechanism, I don't know that you really have too much motivation to sit down and fill out an application for your landlord. But overall, I think the ugliest part of the moratoriums could be over. But as to Jamie's question, what I've always cautioned people too is, even if there is not a moratorium, we have what I'm calling the de facto moratorium, which has been the court closures. So like, for example, Mecklenburg County has not been in session since December. So I could have all the violations in the world, and I can't do anything because I can't get in front of a magistrate, I can't get in front of a judge, I can't get in front of anybody. So that goes back to just protecting, being proactive.
I don't know, I'm not a legal expert, clearly. I don't know if this is true, but this is my husband, Adam, I'm Susie. There's an investor that we're friends with that has evicted tenants recently. I don't know what county it was in. And they said that, I don't know who their legal aid was or what the details really are, but they said that there was something where if you owned a property cash, that the same rules didn't apply if you didn't have a federally backed loan on the property. You know more details.
Yeah, basically it has to do with if it's a federally backed loan, if it's a commercial loan, the laws change for evictions. And if you own it cash outright, but it's more like the Fannie, Freddie, federally backed.
So we were dealing with that. That was under the CARES Act. That was the stimulus bill that President Trump had been part of back in April, maybe, of 2020. So that bill actually expired on the 31st of December. So that issue's gone. That was an issue. What that issue was is saying if you had a federally backed FHA, Freddie Mae, Freddie Mac, or subsidized mortgage, so Section 8 or some kind of housing authority, you couldn't evict for non-payment. Luckily, that's gone. Problem being is this new CDC one goes to everybody now. There was some rumbling that maybe somebody would actually read like a law book and realize that maybe the federal government doesn't have blanket authority to interfere in North Carolina and the other 49 states' private contracts and just put it toward federal mortgages. But now that that is true. Previously, you just had like a cash or a private investment mortgage, you could proceed. But now everyone falls under that CDC protection for non-payment. With the caveats of the CDC protection, one being income of $99,000 or less a year, that you've applied for assistance, that you made partial payments. And keep in mind, I have personally tried to challenge these affidavits, and either we're told in Mecklenburg County just flat out no or ignored, or told in other counties we should have did that before the eviction hearing. But there's really no possible way to do that when they pull it up at the hearing, so we have no knowledge. So assume, in all honesty, for your business purposes, if that affidavit shows up, well, now you have to give it to them. There's a strong likelihood you're going to be in some bit of a pinch and delayed. But that's where we are right now, so it's applied to everybody.
So let's just say the eviction moratorium ends March 31st.
Sure.
There's a year of no
Fingers
payments.
crossed.
Yeah, right. There's a year of no payments that will be done. What, in your opinion, will be the time period that these payments will be allowed to be caught up?
So what's kind of curious is with this moratorium, there was another moratorium in June. It's a really weird moratorium that ran from June 1st to June 22nd. And that moratorium from Governor Cooper said that you had to give tenants 6 months to pay rent. So that put the rent payment due for June in December 23rd, which again, your government at work, horrible timing. People are really worried about on December 23rd paying their landlord from 6 months ago. But there has not been any kind of inkling to my knowledge that there's going to be some kind of time period to pay back rent. I assume there is going to be some kind of attempt, because I've asked the question from day one about what's the windfall suddenly now on April 1st, because you're right, there are people that have not paid since March of last year, never went to court because of the moratorium and the closures, and now they get this massive windfall. Hopefully, there is some recourse. I will say this, another problem is the small claims court is your fastest way to summary ejectment eviction here, and that is capped at $10,000. And that's the caveat of they also have to be personally served by the sheriff, which doesn't happen much, especially in your larger counties. So I'm hoping there is no kind of payment plan caveat. I think this is just projecting that would have already come out.
So do you think then it will just be like, and I know we're talking about eviction specifically, but obviously this pertains to mortgage payments as well and pre-foreclosure, so on April 1st, if they don't have 13 months, so to speak, of payments, is it automatically, like, I know this is kind of conjecture, but automatically go to foreclosure, or do you think they maybe put the payments on the back? Do you think there's payment plan? Like, in my opinion, obviously us as landlords and investors, we want to get our money quickly. I'm sure there's the ethical thing of we don't want to just put someone on the street at the same time, but for me, that whole part of it seems just, there's no roadmap. Like, no one's talking.
Oh, there's none. There's absolutely none.
George, can you repeat his question in 2 minutes time?
Yeah, so I think what he's asking is, what is the roadmap of when this eventually is over? What is the roadmap back to a normal status? Because I'm sure you guys that do your own summary ejectments know North Carolina was really good about a fast procedure getting you in like a week, less than 10 days to go in. And the reality is, like his question of these mortgage payments for foreclosure, these payments for rent, eventually that moratorium is going to end, whether it be April 1st, whether it be May 1st. What's the way back? What's the plan back? As far as this is speculating, when the last moratorium ended, we jumped right back into court sessions, and as long as there was no CARES Act protection, they went forward. So I do think there's going to be some kind of just windfall crazy period where everyone's going to get slammed. My understanding is even with a lot of the forbearances, I don't really focus on that, but they kind of just kick the can down the road. And all of this is really, like I said, it's all, my personal feeling is that all these government actions, these CDC moratoriums, Governor Cooper's moratoriums, it's all been bandage programs. They know there's a massive bleed coming, but they're just going to pop a little bandage on it and figure, well, we'll deal with that in May. But it's coming, and I think it's going to be ugly.
One last question, I know. So this is strictly for people that are on a 12-month lease, is that correct? Or some type of lease? So is it for month-to-month tenants or no?
What do you mean for month-to-month tenants?
If they're
Exactly.
month-to-month, can I kick them out?
Can you terminate the lease?
No, there's no lease. It says month-to-month agreement.
But are you talking about oral lease, or are you talking about you transition to a month-to-month?
No, like a month to month that it expires. Should you put everybody on a month to month at this point?
There you go.
As soon as their
Okay,
long-term
I
lease
see.
expires, you should put them on month to month, so it's not about the payment, it's more about the agreement, and you don't have an agreement, so you can evict.
I would strongly advise considering going month to month with all tenants. I know people that have gone week to week. I don't think anybody wants to really deal with that bookkeeping, but you could go month to month. Now, I will say there has been some inclination in Charlotte, again, looking at Mecklenburg County. Well, it's a month to month, but you're only terminating it because of non-payment. But again, like I said, there's no for cause notice requirement. And just on that, if you are considering the notice, this little caveat, please do the notice right. A lot of people do not know how to do the notices. The statute says one thing, your lease says one thing, your lease probably says 30 days. So a lot of people will say, all right, it's March 15th, I'm gonna give them 30 days, April 15th. They go into court and it gets dismissed. What it doesn't tell you is it has to be the end of the month. So If you give it March 1st, 30-day notice, ends March 31st. So short answer, yes, that's a strong option. I think you should really consider it. Just know your lease termination periods. And again, looking at Mecklenburg County, be ready for a potential issue. If you do it, I would suggest maybe just asking for possession. Nothing's prohibiting you from taking money owed actions. Just one last little caveat. I have had some clients doing something that I call forced settlement, which is basically we're suing the tenant for just money owed, which is not protected. It's just asking for money. It says you owe me on this account $9,000. We want our $9,000. So we sue them. We put it on the docket in small claims, and then we try to work a settlement and tell them, look, you vacate, we'll meet you halfway through. So, there are options, but again, just be proactive. Think about it. Know how to protect yourself. They're not looking out for you in the government in Raleigh. DC's not looking out for you. You gotta look out for yourself. So be proactive.
How do we get in touch with you if anybody wants to reach out to you? Sure.
So I'm gonna give you my direct cell, 980-228-6387. 980-228-6387. I know I've spoken to quite a few of you. I'm very responsive. Text, email George, George, at gibbsglaw.com. Also on Facebook, we have a legal tips for landlords, property managers group. That's kind of our little private legal group where you can ask legal questions. I admin that group. Legal questions, just we put up podcasts. Debbie was just part of a podcast where if you just need to bitch about tenants and what they're doing to your properties, that is your safe space with me moderating it to give you legal tips when I see your problems of something we can help you with. So reach out anytime, text, email, phone, whatever you need to do. I'm trying to help you out.
Curtis, did you have a question? One last question, or?
Yeah, real quick. I don't know how many of you have looked at the HOPE program. I will tell you, I have multiple tenants. The HOPE program will allow them to go 8 weeks, but the HOPE program has transitioned to a new state government agency, NCORR. I had a tenant, they promised $5,800. Somehow they have come out and said, we reevaluated the market rent. I only rent the place for $950. They said the market rent is $1,500. They are now offering $12,000. Take advantage of that. You can't evict if tenants on month to month. You worry about lenders. A lot of lenders are now allowing you. They say, well, you got to have a lease. Ask them if you can do a 6-month lease rather than a 12-month lease, and really screen these folks.
Yeah, just jumping on that, we have renegotiated month-to-month leases just to protect ourselves, but definitely renegotiate your lease. But hopefully that was some good information. Like I said, thank you all for your attention and having me out, Jamie. If you need anything, feel free to shoot me an email, shoot me a text, and join our Facebook group. Appreciate it, everybody.
Thank you.
Good job, George. All right, so moving this right along, our next speaker is a good friend of mine. His name's Anthony Curie.